The following program is intended for mature audiences.
Shalom and welcome to the Synagogue. This is a podcast for consenting adults for information, education, and entertainment on BDSM, sexuality, and all things related. If you're not a legal, enthusiastically consenting adult, then
pick up the needle, press pause, or turn the radio off.
For those who remain, now might be a good time to switch to your headphones.
Welcome to the Synagogue. I am your host, and they call me the Rabbi.
Pretty fly for a rabbi.
I put the sin in synagogue, and I am a cisgender, ambimorous, gynosexual, sadistic, bratty daddy doll. Sex therapist by day, kink educator by night, and in both these roles, I help people make their kink a religious experience. While I am a mental health professional, this podcast is for educational and entertainment purposes only and is not a replacement for therapy. Seek out the assistance of a trained professional for help with your specific situation. Hosting with me today is my partner, my ADHD squirrel wrangler, my submissive, my brat, my pony, or just my little pony. Aww. The milk to my cookies. Little bit. This is episode number 19, and with us today are Master Brian and Radiant Saphira to talk to us about living by your nature, adapting gore to fit you. What is gore? How can you apply it to your life and your dynamic? What are the common misconceptions? How you can live in contrast to what's generally believed about Gorean free and their slaves. We will learn about Master Brian and Saphira's application of gore in their dynamic and how it has empowered them to dig deep and begin becoming their most authentic selves. You will learn what it means to truly treasure your kajira and what it is like being the most precious property without the isms commonly associated with literature-based applications of gore. But first, a word from our sponsor. Master Brian is a Gorean Master who has been a part of the BDSM community for over a decade. His biggest passion is education. He travels the world to teach in vanilla spaces and hopes to one day do the same in BDSM kink ones too. On his left is his property, Radiant Saphira, who has had the honor of being owned by Master Brian for 3 years. She is a proud kajira, leathergirl, and aspiring bootblack, holding the positions of secretary for both Twin Cities Spectrum, a BIPOC backpatch leather club, and HardPink Sisterhood, a leather sisterhood for non-men identifying persons. She is passionate about uplifting and celebrating the intersectionalities that make each person's experience unique and special. Master Brian as head and Radiant Saphira as the first girl protect House Azura, an inclusive and interdisciplinary progressive Gorean /BDSM /leather house, reflecting on House Azura's motto, "The universe is ever expanding." And that's in Latin, and I'm not going to pronounce it in Latin because it would be a disaster. Master Brian and Radiant Saphira believe that it is through knowledge sharing and community building that a person's universe of knowledge continues to grow. Thank you for being here in the synagogue. Let's talk Gorean.
Thank you for being here. Welcome.
Well, thank you.
Thank
you for having us. So I guess to start out, let me start out by saying there is a little saying from Gore. No two masters are the same, except as each is a total master. And no two slaves are the same, except that each are a slave. So that's from one of the books, the Kajira Gore. So we can only speak about our life experience and the knowledge that is shared with us by those who have mentored us and supported us over the years. As a disclaimer, we are not a book-accurate Gorean Master Kajira couple, and we don't claim to be, nor are we a live-action role players that you might see online through platforms such as Second Life or applications of Gore that can be described as a hybrid of leather. Ours is kind of like an old-school BDSM mixed with ancient Roman pleasure slavery with a touch of Gorean inspiration.
That works.
So the Gorean Saga is a fictional science fantasy book series, and it's made up of about 38 books, give or take, because they're more constantly coming out, and they were authored by John Norman, who was a philosophy professor from Chicago, and he really wondered what it would be like to live on a fictional planet that was kind of counter to Earth. And he pulled from his favorite philosophical belief systems and sprinkled in ancient Roman pleasure slavery. And the idea for this planet was that modern technology was not made available past swords in terms of development. And so humanity was seen to progress, quote unquote, naturally. And so it was his idea on what could happen if the world didn't continue the way that it did on Earth, and that men had people assigned male at birth had extra testosterone, women were hypersexual, and the storylines focus on people leaving Earth to discover how their life was a result of suppressing sexual desire, denying their true nature, and then they go on to discover what it means to be free of the binds of Earth-based society. And this is probably going to be the last time you hear us talk about the books, because our experience was community focused and interaction focused and not very book heavy.
Okay.
So a couple definitions you're probably going to hear us use. When we say master or slave, master or mistress, it just means owner. The left side of the slash. Free is just those who do not identify as being property, but are also not owners. Kajira is considered property, whether it's male, female, non-binary, whatever. It's just that's the property, so they're called kajira. And we believe that the gore that we practice, roles, they're not gender specific, as you would see in the books, but truth specific. So we'll touch more on that later on.
And that's kind of something that the way we practice can get a little bit of flack from people that like to be more book focused, but the idea that roles are not gender specific is something that we learned when we learned about gore from other people who practice it, and it's not something that people who are heavily into the books may support. And it's something that we kind of get a little bit of pushback on,
Sure.
But we like the idea that the books, when you take away specific characters and sort of like some of the messages that you can experience, can go beyond specific gender. And we like it as a framework for dynamics rather than a philosophical framework on how to be human.
So kind of like here's the boundaries, here's what you like, but not necessarily like hard and fast rules of like we absolutely have to use the book, because the idea is like to enjoy it, not be like, ew. Okay.
Yes, of course.
Just double checking. Thank you.
Generally in the community, a lot of times when people hear gore, or the people that have some kind of experience with gore over the years, the first thing they just start thinking about is all assigned males at birth are masters, no matter what. All assigned females at birth are slaves. It doesn't matter. Everybody gets this idea of guys running around with big muscles and swords and the Conan look, and then all the ladies are these big boob, beautiful, long hair, sexual objects that just run around and can't stop having sex with everybody, and this ultimate sexual desire or something. And then slaves are doormats. You know, they have no thinking for themselves or anything like that. They do exactly what we say, when we say, how we say at all times, and that's really not true.
And we're not against people who consent to be that, or find in their nature that is the kind of slave that they want to be, is to be one that I wouldn't say doormat, but don't feel like they want to fall into the strong intellectual slave. Because last time we taught this class, there was a slave that asked, if it's in my nature to want to be a doormat, am I welcome in this space? And so we'll be like, yes, of course. But the negative connotation that you have to be that and it's forced on you in order to be a slave in this framework, we don't agree with.
Sure.
Well, I mean, it makes sense if it's, if that's the consenting thing of, hey, this is what I want, maybe my everyday life is just high stress, and when I come home, I want to be I don't have to use as much brain power to do lots of different things. I know my role, I know my place, I know, I will be told as to what I want to do type thing. So that makes sense to be welcome in that space if that's what they would like to be. If I'm understanding that correctly.
Yeah, while we don't follow the Gorean philosophy as almost like a religious text, like some people do, which is fine, and that's for them. It's just that's not how we do it. To understand, we interact with each other. It's helpful to know that there tends to be some overlapping and similarities between us and other Gorean inspired dynamics. The basis of the Gorean philosophy is a bit of an extension of Norman's influence that he got from other people like Homer, Freud, Aristotle, Nietzsche. I mean, he was a philosophy professor, so he was all over the place as far as how he got everything. But the Gorean ethos is basically, by living by a code, the Gorean ethos is like strength, freedom, honor, integrity, duty. So we found the codes as kind of like a ground for our life and to be true to them, which the main thing about Gore is being true to your nature. So if you're being true to your nature, for us, that's you're doing the right thing. And if it's in your nature that you're a master, okay, no matter what you were assigned at birth or however you identify, if that's being true to your nature, then that's it. If you in your heart believe that you're a slave or submissive, a kajira, then that's what you should do and be true to your nature. So that's where the main framework is it's be true to your nature, be true to who you are, who you think you are, and not how other people tell you to be.
And so one way we do that is we find the codes that ground our life, and we work to integrate them consistently and let them guide you. So the way that it presents itself in our household is so Master follows military codes and has followed military codes since his enlistment and time in the army. For those who may be listening and are Gorean, that would make him in the warrior caste. So that means the baseline codes for him and how he tries to live his life is with honor, respect, integrity, and duty, especially the duty to protect. Master and I spent some time being long distance, and when I moved away, I was able to figure out what my codes by myself are, because for me, since we entered into a dynamic, it was easy for me to identify with his, because in Gore, there's this idea that the slaves' ethics are that of their masters. But it was important to me to figure out what they would be for myself as well. And in my journey, I've found to identify with leather codes. So respect, honor, loyalty, honesty, service, siblinghood. As a household, we wanted to kind of combine them and find where they overlap and find ways to root our household with our homestone. And our house's codes are honesty, integrity, equity, respect, discipline, scholarship, and community. What does living by your codes mean? It's not just verbally saying you follow them, but again, as I said previously, integrating them into your life and learning how to do better if you come across various dilemmas that can be present or pop up.
So living in accordance to your nature, the main one for us is being true to yourself, like we said. This one is where Gore gets a bad name, and it can lead to arguments between the traditional side of certain people in Gore and the inclusive Goreans. So for us in House Azura and those that we are in the community with, we amend the core principles to live in accordance with your nature and to be true to yourself, not just be true to what it says that you should be.
This means not denying who you are because of what others believe you to be, or even what you think you should be. This can be big and this can be in small ways, because I know that sounds really intimidating. And I know Master touched about this previously. If in your heart you feel submissive, be it. If you think you have a slave heart, nurture it. If you feel like your gender does not match the sex you were assigned at birth, we will be the ride or dies. We'll support your want to express it in a way that feels most to you, because for us that feels like living your truest nature. Or on the smaller end, if you don't want to go somewhere, saying no to the invitation. And we will say this does not mean to use "I'm living true to my nature" as an excuse to be a predator or a dangerous person, because choices in real life are dictated by requirements that are placed on us by higher powers. That is why that there is no one-to-one between the books and real life Earth, because in the books, they just pick up humans and kidnap them and drop them onto a planet and say, hey, you are here, I'm going to tackle you to the ground, and you are now my slave. You can't really do that legally on Earth. But within the best of your ability, it's striving to be the you on the outside that fits the inside, or putting in the work to figure out what it is or who you are on the inside when you peel away the layers, which can be difficult. And it's not really a one-size-fits-all. There is no mold, despite, as I'm sure you've come across for other subcultures, the one true way isms. And they're all over FetLife, of course, as well for Goreans, too.
For us, what that looks like for Saphira, it was battling body dysmorphia or conquering her internalized racism that she had for herself, being of a different race than like me, or choosing a career path that brought professional fulfillment over what her family piety told her to do. And this also means living in harmony with the world around you and finding beauty in the world that houses you and living in a way that supports what you are. So this could be spending time in nature. It could be recycling. It could be admiring nature from the inside. It's just how it is for us.
Yes, I enjoy looking at the beauty from outside while inside, with a window in between us, because I know we said we're not going to reference the books. They do talk about the beauty that comes from nature when there's no pollution, when the modern technology hasn't caused trash to be places, or what it's like when Mother Nature can just take over spaces and be free. So we have met quite a few Goreans who like to lean into that aspect, as well as living in accordance with nature, as well as living accordance with their own nature.
For me, being a Gorean Master, what that means to me is protect the property with every ounce of my being. That is number one, the top thing, first rule: protect the property. And you protect that. You're the master. You protect it with every ounce of your being, no matter what. For myself, having bestowed the title Master means that I live up to the expectations and the tenets of our house and of Gore and the peers that actually gave me that title. So being a master is taking something of raw beauty, such as your kajira, and polishing it and turning it into this radiant jewel.
Pun intended.
As a master, you're not only responsible for yourself, but you are responsible for that property. So no matter the action or consequence, you are master, you are responsible in every way. And if it's not performing correctly, it's on you. Being a master is to have someone trust you so much that they are letting you make decisions for them in every way, that even if they don't agree with you, but they're trusting you that much to do that and make those decisions.
And as a kajira, I will say a gore adapted dynamic can feel a little bit more like owner property compared to master slave in the way that we talk about kajira as property and being treasured, and that possession aspect there. We use master slave language because that's the way that it was framed by the author. As a kajira, you'll hear things thrown around that a kajira's one task, well, two tasks, but they kind of mold it into one, is exquisite beauty and absolute obedience. This one was hard for us to, I don't want to say identify with. This was hard for us to figure out how it applied to us, because coming in, beauty feels, the idea of beauty, especially as someone who grew up in a area that did not reflect what I looked like, this idea that it's my expectation that I have to be found exquisitely beautiful was intimidating and a little anxiety inducing, to be honest. So we tweaked it a little bit to be exquisite individuality and intelligent obedience. So for me, this means being a kajira is nurturing the parts of myself that make me different and special to my master. So expanding beauty to be all things. So it is my personality, it is my mind, it is my hobbies, it is my ADHD, and so many more things. It is a journey of seeing me as a treasure to him, which is the hardest part still, even from the beginning to now, the hardest part of what I call my silks journey. Exquisite individuality is the increasing desirability and connection between myself and my master. As the bond grows, so has my belief in myself on what makes me special, and that specific way, and only I can serve him and only I can be his property. I very much do not like this misconception that kajira have to be doormats and mindless slaves because they serve for their master's pleasure and happiness. One of the biggest assets for my master is my mind, and it is my duty to obey intelligently and smartly look him in the eye and say, and I do quite frequently, respectfully, absolutely the fuck not, when he asks me to complete an order that goes against our household's first rule of protecting the property. As a kajira, my obedience stems not from fear, like in the books. In the books, it's very much rooted specifically in this fear of the slave whip. But I personally love seeing master pleased. And so you'll hear a lot of kajira say that their second or third mission is to please and be found pleasing. A lot of times it's framed just sexually, but for us, we like to expand that as someone who is ace flux to be that I like to please master in all ways and be found pleasing in many things, not just sexual. So that's his pride, that's his happiness, that is his love. Many times when I ask him, Master, are you pleased? Or if I'm in a space that I need that affirmation, I will ask him why, when he says yes. And he will list off so many things, and not within the top 10 will it be a sexual reason. And I feel like that's a big misconception for how gore can be applied.
A lot of questions that we get asked is, why gore? Why did we even use gore? Why do people use gore? And my mentor, or one of my mentors, Master Dean, I asked him that same question at the very beginning. I was like, why gore? Why this? Why this book? And he goes, well, everything needs a starting point and everything needs a name. So there's your answer. And I was like, oh, good God. But what we've come to find out is the bottom line of it was the Gore concepts kind of provided a nice framework to follow for MS. And the people that we've talked to, that's how we've pretty much figured it out. On one hand, there's a lot of rituals, there's a lot of structure, and a lot of protocols that were good for starting places to build an MS dynamic on for us. On the other hand, there was an emphasis on complete openness from a slave girl in a collar that's not allowed inhibitions. This removes us from half-truths, lies by omission, or just uneasiness or being evasive or anything like that. So we love the structure that the protocols and rituals from the books give to our dynamic. Part of those rituals and some of the things that we took was branding, for starters. She does have a brand. She has a kajira tattoo, or a Dina on her left leg. We did it as an actual tattoo because in the books they do it with an actual hot 500-degree brand for 7 seconds or something like that. I do know people that have done that. I personally do not do that with my slave because of the fact that to me that would be scarring her, and that's damaging my property. That's not making it better. So we chose that type of brand, and a lot of other people do too. There's the collaring, the fact that you're collared would be another one of the big things from the books as far as the dynamic that we go of your kajira.
Master, may I jump in, please?
Yep.
So to give more context on the branding and collaring within the I said I'm not going to reference the books, but here I am referencing the books. So in the books, the humans were taken from Earth, put onto Counter Earth, which I can't believe they named it Counter Earth, and Gore. So when they became slaves, this was this idea that the brand marks the status, the collar signifies the ownership. And so there's a specific place on the body, which is most commonly the left hip, of where the brands could be. There are the ones you see most frequently all over FetLife, which is a Kef, which is a cursive K. I have a Dina, which is known as the slave flower, and the reason why we picked it is because it looked like the Sampaguita flower, which as a Filipino American, it was a very important flower for me, and we loved that way it could tie into my personal identity. And in terms of the collar, you'll see them a lot now. It's called the Turin collar. You'll see them mostly in BDSM spaces as the metal, like eternity collar or infinity collar. That metal circlet collar was very prominent in the books, and that type of style they marked as a Turian collar because the masters would grab and have space for a master's fist to hold a collar and pull their slaves around. And so we love that we've been able to include branding and collaring into our dynamic. And like in the books, when a slave is collared, they're gifted a name. And so that is when he named me Saphira.
Gotcha.
Back to you, Master.
Yeah, and then some of the other things that you'll definitely see people doing are the Gorean slave positions, like the Nadu or the submission position, or Karta tower, a certain position to be collared. You've seen pictures all over FetLife of people doing different versions of these positions. By no means am I saying that Norman invented them or anything, but for us, those positions, they had certain names. That's where they came from. Then you have the Gorean style serving that she does, or how she serves me when she's serving something. And that one, actually, he got that more from like the Roman slaves of how they serve. Anytime that somebody sees her giving me something, such as like food or a drink, they'll see her kiss it. or hold it up to her lips, and they always think that that's what she's doing, is kissing it. Quite honestly, that's not what she's doing, actually. And people kind of laugh when they figure it out. She's actually testing it for poison.
Gotcha.
It's supposed to be symbolizing of her testing something for poison, trying to keep her master safe. And then there's the Gorean style clothing, such as the camisks or the silk that they wear around, that a lot of the slaves wear around. The standing permission that you can take away, their ability to eat or speak or anything like that at any time. Healing to the left side, and they're always 2 spaces back. When you're in high protocol areas, kneeling in the presence of your master, not having eye contact, like you see in a lot of high protocol things. The Kurt, and the Kurt is kind of the hard one to explain without actually seeing it. But what the Kurt is we talked about the slave whip. So masters definitely have a Kurt when they become a master. They get one, or you are gifted the ability to have one. And what the Kurt is it's a slave whip with 5 tails. They're about 2 inches wide and about 2.5 feet long. And there's 5 of them, and they're leather, and then they're on a 2-foot handle. And as Saphira or just about any other kajira can tell you, is very intimidating and hurts very much so. And they all feel that curse when they become a kajira.
Now I want one.
And then
that would be my red. That's a red for me.
Well, I can let you see it, and I can tell you this much. I can even tell you who could make you one and who made mine. I have a couple. I have my old mentors before he passed away, and then I have the one that was personally made for me by another Gorean Master, who is a leather worker, who is a very skilled leather worker at that, and did just this beautiful job making my Kurt. And actually was even one of the ones, that when we were getting into it, both of us kind of, looked up to even them, which, showed me actually how to swing the thing and not hurt somebody with it. But then, you have the adapt as part of like the white silk, which a white silk, if they're in the camis or silks, white silks, it signifies that somebody was a virgin and they were in training. For us, it's, obviously they're not virgins, but if you have somebody that's a training and just coming into the lifestyle and learning from another kajira, they're in a white silk until they graduate up into their colored silks. And then the homestone that we have, which is just every Korean group or master has a homestone in his house. And then like our house has a homestone, and it's just a symbol of, hey, that you're Korean.
I will add more context to what my
Thank you.
master does. So in the literature, there was this idea that the white silks were very much protected, right? So that they either had lower duty so they could learn about themselves. So the reason why we have white silks in our household is because when we were learning about this and when I was learning about myself, I did not feel ready to take on this identifier as being a full red silk. So red silk means pleasure slave, right? So I didn't feel comfortable taking on that role because the kajiras that I looked up to and was learning from, I was like, how can we have the same title, or how can we be the same level if I don't feel like I'm there yet? So we wanted to adapt the white silk to be like this transitional period where you're finding yourself. You're figuring out what it means to be in this role or be yourself and learn from your like silk siblings, or that aspect of learning and training and not knowing yet, instead of virginity, because that is an antiquated idea that
Sure.
I reject. And for homestones, it's kind of the foundational rock of what a house is built on. So you'll have houses that have homestones, in the books, you'll have towns that have homestones, and for them to start a war, sometimes they'll go in and like steal each other's homestones. So it's something that's very much treasured and protected in terms of like, this is what we gather around, or this is something that has like the house's script on it, the name on it, like this is like a physical, tangible thing that represents us being a community together.
Okay, I was going to ask, just by how both of you were describing it, is this an actual tangible, physical thing that, you have that's your homestone, or is it more of just like, not just like, here, this is our home and our house is saying, that type thing.
We actually do have a homestone. Most Gorean Masters have their own homestone. You can use anything you want as a homestone.
Master's mentor. It was funny because ours is we picked lapis lazuli as like our homestone. We have like a beautiful lapis, and because of its connection with education, intelligence, the significance throughout history. And so ours is small. And when I moved to Minnesota, I was feeling very much away from him and away from his household. So he gifted me a tiny little lapis to be my satellite homestone, which kind of threw some other Gorean masters through a tizzy, because a slave having their own homestone. What?
That's crazy. But
yeah, so there are folks that have a homestone that just stays in their house, and it'll be in like a central location, like a living room or a great room. And then they'll travel around with like a smaller version, like the traveling homestone. Master's mentor picked this, had giant rocks in front of his house. One of them was his homestone, but it was a secret which one it is, because it's supposed to be kept safe and secretive, because you don't want someone to steal it for you. And so apparently I never knew which one it was, but he picked the heaviest one that you can't move, because you can't steal it.
I knew which one it was, and yeah, it weighed over 1,000 pounds. You weren't getting that homestone. I don't care how hard you try.
But so you mentioned, having your own homestone as a slave, and, but you also mentioned, feeling disconnected. So at the same time, from an outsider's perspective, that's one of those like, oh, hey, that makes sense to have something that, helps you feel connected when you're far away.
Absolutely. And it got to the point that we even got me a bracelet of lapis beads so I could feel the protection of his homestone whenever I went to events by myself, or even just traveled home to see my family. Or even I'll put it on now when I go to work, because it feels like it's engulfing me in the protection of the homestone when we're not together. Sure. So I love it. I think it's something that's unique, and as someone who likes crystals, it's like, oh, it's another reason to have a thing.
But it also personalizes things for you too, yeah. and which is awesome. That's really cool.
People ask us like, how is being a Gorean different from normal MS, and we can only speak on what we've heard in the different between our dynamic and those who are in the MS dynamic and are either rooted in leather or BDSM. I guess you could say it's closer to owner property, like I said earlier. But kajira pretty much just means slave girl, and la kajira means I am slave girl. That might be why it's more referred to as an MS type of dynamic.
And so the first biggest difference between that I've found when I talked to other slaves is the roles as identity. From what I've heard, there are slaves that identify as slave within relationships. My dear friend, she will tell me, she was like, if I am not with my master, I identify as a submissive with a slave heart. I have the potential to being a slave to the right master. And sort of this idea that them and their master met as equals, and she lowered herself to be a slave. But for me as a kajira, because I've earned my brand, even without his collar, I still hold on very tightly to that title. I don't see myself as a submissive with a slave heart. I am a kajira because that identity was nurtured together, yes, but also very individually. And I view my status as inherently being at that level of a slave, not equal with my master until I lowered myself. And I don't mind being on different planes with my master in terms of like where our status, if we weren't together, would be, because I view myself as sort of, so he is a car guy. I view myself as like a 1960s fancy vintage car that he will take a Q-tip and like, and dust to keep in mint condition and tell the car like, I love you before going to bed. I've also found that at least in the tiny community that we learned in, that like the title of master in the Gorean context is given similarly to the title of master in the leather community. We're not saying that it's a one-to-one. Master never claims that he is a leather-covered master because that's very, very different. But he took up that title when his mentor told him, okay, it's time for you to do this, and it's time for you to identify like this. And so he would also continue to stay a Gorean master, even if he didn't have a kajira at that moment. And so there's this idea that as you become your role, because you're living out your truest nature, it's not relationship based. It's very much like human you based. And so I feel like that's a little bit of a difference in the way that the titles and the names and the roles kind of function between a Gorean MS and what we've heard from our friends who are not Gorean but in MS dynamics.
I mean, even if our dynamic ended tomorrow, so her brand marks her as a kajira. She's always going to be a kajira. It's the collar that's around her neck that identifies her as owned property. So even if I take my collar back or take my collar away and she's not my slave anymore, she's still a kajira. Even if she's not my slave, I'm still a master. I'm just not her master.
Gotcha.
So it's in principle that just the things that, you know, it's who you are, and once you've earned that, that's you've earned it. And you know, as long as you're living within your core principles of living in accordance with your nature and living true to your codes, you know, exquisite individuality and intelligent obedience for us, or to please and to be found pleasing, you know, then for us you're doing it right.
Another thing that we've found different, or at least I have found different as someone who has come from a different type of power exchange dynamic, a DS, to a Gorean adapted master-slave, is the kind of significance to the positionings and the Gorean slave positions. And I'm sure we've talked about how you see them all over FetLife. It was one of the first things that I ever learned about when I was researching, like, what is DS? What are submissives? It's that stock image of all the different positions that you can find on Google Images. But as I've grown as a kajira and learn that there's like a special vulnerability that comes with them. Like, for example, Nadu, the reason why your knees are open or your palms are up, it's supposed to signify this complete open vulnerability, that the most vulnerable parts of you are all open on display in the most vulnerable way possible to your master. And so that is a position that I will only do in front of him or in front of Mini Master, which is an amazing Night Fury stuffed animal that I got before we moved that I would take to events with me. So I would stand on Mini Master's left. I would do positions to Mini Master if I had to put on my collar. And so the ways in which the positions function, or what it means to, for example, me or my friend who is a different slave, who more used them for discipline as sort of like personal discipline on ways to move their body and stress positions felt very different when we were talking about them to each other.
Speaking about the little mini master, actually. So yeah, it's a little night fury. It's a little stuffy. It actually has a recording in it that she knows what it says, and that she can listen to with my voice when I'm not around. But when we were long distance, and she's taking this little mini master with her, somebody would try to like sit on her left hand side. And she would put the mini master in a chair, and they'd walk up and start to move it. She's like, "Oh no, that's my master's spot. That's mini master." Or you have big bad Dom. I'm gonna go and steal this girl away, and they would come up and they'd start talking to her, ask where her master was, so they could ask permission to talk, and she would be like, point to the little mini master, and you got big bad master now that has to literally ask this little stuffy, "Can I talk to your slave?" And then for the slave to lean down and like act like it's whispering to her, and she goes, "Nope, he doesn't give permission." And I actually got phone calls on this from friends in Minnesota that we had met, and they were like, one of them, John, he was like, "B, the funniest thing I've ever seen is this big old dude thinking he's all big and bad walk up and ask your girl if he can talk to her, and she tells him to ask the stuffy, so now he's got to talk to a stuffy, and then her to look at him and go, he says no. Go away now." And them just be like, "Huh?" And just get put in their place.
That is fantastic.
I wish I could have saw it. I wish they would have videotaped it a couple times so I could have seen this. But yeah, that's got to be a great way to just like blow somebody off that you don't want to talk to.
That is absolutely fantastic.
I agree. It was something I ad-libbed one night, because when we're together, I am under communication restrictions, and I'll have a little tag on my collar that says "ask to interact." And so people will see the yellow tag, and then they'll ask him. They'll then talk to me as someone who has a lot of social anxiety, going to an event and being like, "I am alone. I don't have a human buffer. What do I do?" And so someone came up to me, tried to negotiate play with me, and I was just like, "Here," shoved it in his face and went, "You have to talk to Mini Master. I am under communication restrictions." And it stuck. And it's amazing.
That's awesome.
It's great hearing all these like stories from your friends like far away about it, and you're just like, "Oh wow, yeah." Like, I'm going to steal that. Oh, be my guest.
And so I will say the final difference that I have heard between me and my other friends who are slaves is the why. Why do slaves surrender? Why do slaves submit? My friends who have had this conversation with me have expressed, and I've heard reasons that are kind of self-focused. They love that it's a way to relax. It's a way to let go. They like the feeling of shutting down their mind and exchanging that power. For me, and for some other kajiras that I've learned from, it's to please. It's kind of a more external reason specifically of to please and be found pleasing. And that is the entirety of the external reasoning. And like, that's like the end all be all is that. And so that locus of why, is it internal? Is it how you feel versus external? And I know there's like a whole range in between, because of course I like shutting off my brain. But if I personally had to weigh the feeling of being able to be in a slave headspace and the benefits of feeling that control being transferred to master versus the look on his face when he is absolutely happy at something I did, it shifts all the way to the second as like my number one, and then everything else is subpoints.
And I have definitely caught some slack over this from a couple different masters in the community. I've had people walk up to me, and even my mentor, and be like, "You're letting your kajira run around and play and joke and doing this and that." And I'm like, "Yeah." And they're like, "Well, no, you should be doing this and that." And I'm like, "Why?" well, because that's not the proper way to let them run or be. And I'm just like, okay, so her one job is to please me. And she's amusing me as much as you can get. And I'm sitting here laughing and I'm happy and I like watching it. So wouldn't she be doing what she's supposed to be doing because I'm happy? Or I've had masters be dumb enough to challenge her on certain things, or other kajira on certain philosophical issues or things like that, and have thought that they were going to pull the master card of basically, shut up, I'm master, you're just going to take what I say and that's it. And I've seen her go off on them. And I've told her, speak your mind. That is, I don't want a doormat. I didn't ask for one. There's a reason I picked somebody that was highly educated that will definitely tell you what they think. And I've had masters tell me, your slave went off on me like this, and she treated me like that, this and that, and I can't believe that you let her act like this. And I'm looking at all the things, and I'm just like, yeah, I'm amused as you can get. I'm laughing as far as I can go that she just put you in your place. She did her job real well. I can't stop laughing. So, it's like, yeah, you can sit there and tell me all you want, but she's doing exactly what I trained her to do. I trained her to please me, and that's what she's doing. So just because you don't agree with how she's doing that, well, that's fine. She's doing what she's supposed to for me, and she's not your slave.
There is this, I hate that this exists, this idea in some circles that a kajira cannot negotiate, because to negotiate means that you have property, that you have things to negotiate. And so this idea that slaves are unable to negotiate their dynamic is pushed in spaces. And I very much push back. I will be like, we are on Earth. Do you see a giant bird that's the size of an SUV that flies you places? No. Like, you can't apply this as a one-to-one because it doesn't exist. It's a fictional world. And that is one of the things that I push back heavily on whenever I come across it. And it usually comes from the folks who then will look at him and be like, how dare your slave, one, not address me as master because I was assigned male at birth, and two, they are speaking to me disrespectfully. And he'll just be like, why? He'll just laugh and be like, you are the one that has these ideas that she's pushing back on, but also, by your own logic, why are you arguing with a slave and lowering yourself to that position? I am amused, and he'll laugh in the little corner. But yes, there are some beliefs in some of the more traditional gore spaces that we try actively to push back on. And that is one of them, is that this idea that slaves cannot negotiate, because how could slaves have power to negotiate if they are property and are supposed to be lower than animals?
Yeah, I'm definitely a firm believer when it comes to MS dynamics in general. You never negotiate from a place of power. You are both on even ground when you do negotiations. That's it. If you're doing it from a place of power or above them, then how are you getting their honest answer on what they really want or what they're comfortable with? Sure. So they shouldn't ever have that fear that, oh, if I don't agree to this, they're not going to like me or this or that. It should always be from an equal standpoint. And yeah, that whole, I'm just going to grab you by the hair and drag you around and you're just going to be mine. I'm man, hear me roar. It just, yeah, we don't agree with that.
So it sounds like you do gore different than most people do gore. So my question would be, why still do gore and not do something else?
Like I said, it makes, it was a good framework. And, everything needed a name. And if I ever thought of some different name and wanted to come up with a bunch of different things, then maybe I would. But the person that introduced it to us, or the people that introduced it to us, and then, how they were doing it and based it on it, it fit for us. So
It was one of those things that until we started offering this class, that we didn't know we apply it so differently, because the little space where we learned as well as where we practice, there's a lot of overlap that think the same that we do. So when we then offered our class for the first time and then got the feedback of like, no, switches cannot be, you can't be a switch as a Gorean. You cannot have different pronouns and all these things. We were like, whoa, hold on. We're confused. So even sometimes we honestly ask ourselves why we call what we do Gore. But I think it's also because of what the root and essence it is, since it's still that heavily focused on nature and that experience of the characters. When you take away all the different gender roles that are forced onto them, that story of figuring out who you are and finding joy in being that, I think that's the one thing that keeps us linked to that name.
That's fair.
I mean, honestly, if we follow the base guideline of live in accordance to your nature, yours. And I've had this discussion with people. I've had people ask me. We were up in Kansas City and we were doing a round circle on it. And I had a trans person ask me. They were like, "Could I be a master or could I be a kajira?" And I was like, "Is that within your nature of do you feel like you're a kajira?" And they said yes, but the general consensus is I'm trans. I can't do this. I looked at him and I said, first of all, who am I to tell you what you can or can't do? I'm sitting here telling you to do what's in accordance with your nature, not mine or my philosophies or my thoughts. I'm saying within yours. And if that's what you feel in your heart, that's what you are, then who am I to tell you you can't be this? No matter how you were born. So that, yeah, we caught some flack over that one for sure. If I'm following my core philosophy, which is live in accordance to my nature, then I shouldn't be able to tell anybody what they can or can't do. Especially just because you were born with a penis. Or if you were born with a vagina or whatever you were born with at birth, it's just wrong to tell somebody that they have to be something just because.
And the narratives that we hear pushed forth most are also the narratives that kind of ignore the pieces in the books that reference that there are other places that have completely different cultures. And that, again, as we quoted in the beginning, no two homestones, no two towns, no two households are the same, even in the fictional world that people try to apply so religiously. So then why is it when it's pulled into real life, there's this one true wayism that hyper-focuses on one aspect of the books or one character's journey through the universe and says that's the only way that it can be applied, when even in this universe it's acknowledged that things are totally different wherever you go, from dress to brands to how the slaves serve. But with anything, there's going to be those voices and narratives that are dominant that can try to force people to all do the same
Were
thing.
these books intended to be a belief system, or was that something that just kind of happened?
Oh, no. No. As a matter of fact, Norman, when he's been asked in interviews, he swears up and down that these have nothing to do with BDSM or anything like that. Now,
that you didn't expect anybody to try to apply them at all, because they were supposed to be a very thought-provoking, philosophical just lens for him of like what could happen if everything was the opposite of what it is now, which we find amusing. That it could have been anything. Like, it could have been that there is like, what if Harry Potter turned into like a lifestyle thing of like, instead of doms and subs, they have different houses and like the way that they all interact. I feel like it was just, especially because the protocols are so written out And when it was published, it was around still the time of Story of O. So those were like the two big kind of BDSM-ish, kinky books, and they kind of just got held onto and identified with by subgroups of people. But I do not think that it was supposed to be a philosophical thing, especially now in the spaces, because I sometimes do find myself in Facebook groups of people just to see what's happening, especially now with the debates in terms of culturally which way we go. It seems that people are moving even more towards this divide between, can it be applied in like a BDSM kink space, or is it something that is almost a religious calling, and that divide keeps getting larger and larger, even in the 4 years that we've applied it amongst ourselves.
Gotcha. So how did the two of you discover gore?
It was me. This is this is all on me.
Okay.
So we started as a daddy baby girl dynamic, a DDLG, and something just didn't feel right. I felt like I always needed more. And as much as I love my master, he was trying so hard to be a daddy dom. It just it didn't mesh well with him and who he is as a human. And so now I identify as more of like a latchkey little, like I will do the things by myself and he will support me and like exist as like kind of like, well, we're a sister house with a house of middles and littles, and they'll refer to him as like the grumpy uncle that is supportive, but like there in the corner. And so I found myself always wanting more. I was like, for some reason, I just really want either more control given away. I don't like this idea of being propped up as his little princess. Like there was something very much missing. And at that time we ran into another couple that practiced it, and the way that I saw them look at each other and kind of the pride in his eyes when he looked at his kajira and kind of that serenity or like serene nature that she had on her face and in her body. And you can tell that she felt so empowered and so just herself, if that makes any sense. I was like, I want that. And so I turned to him and I was like, "Ooh, do you want to try Master Slave?" And the look on his face went, "Oh my God, no."
No, not oh no, but oh hell no.
And so then I was like, okay, let's try to read the books and see what happens. And so then I read the books and I'm like, "Oh, Master, look at this." And it went even farther for him to be like, no.
This is the worst written book I've ever read. Why? Because even in the spaces that do follow it religiously, there is an acknowledgement that there are just paragraphs that are like copied and pasted, that he will describe a tree for like 2 pages, and then anytime you see that tree, it's literally the same text copied and pasted. That's not denied by many circles. Oh, he never said he was a good writer.
And so, I then had to do the search of, okay, how do you apply this? And so I did something I wasn't expecting. I like searched through FetLife and was like, okay, but like, how is this actually used? And we came across his mentor's writings because he got this question a lot of like, what is this? How do you apply this? And so I found writings that were maybe 10 years old, and every day I would just send him one and be like, "Hey, look at this thing. Hey, also look at this thing. Oh, look, this is what it does. This is how you apply it too. See, it's not as bad." And he slowly got more interested because he had never seen himself as a master. He had this kind of view of like the micromanaging image of what it means to own someone and have a slave. And then, of course, being in an interracial relationship, there were like all the different layers that comes with having a white master and a Filipino pleasure slave, right? There's like very there was a lot of things we had to work through.
Sure.
But then he took that class and was able to do the equivalent of what I did when I went and I talked to Kajira and being like, hey, what do you get out of this? What is this like for you? Please tell me how you found this. And when he talked to his mentor, I could almost see when it clicked in his brain of like, oh, I think this makes sense for me now. And I think that hearing the story of how his mentor came into things helped him take that step. Meanwhile, I was getting called into intervention circles by friends being like, are you sure you want to be a slave? Are you okay? Are you safe? Because the community that we're in at the time, our friend circles are very kink heavy, not power exchange heavy. And so us even being a DDLG was a lot for them. But then going to that, I won't say next level because I don't like the tiered system that some people place on power exchange. But then going on to like owner property or master slave, we had a bunch of concerned friends. But thankfully we've been able to lower their concerns as we've been together and being in an MS dynamic.
I was pretty much like everybody else that are out there, people that I've met. I'd heard a lot of stereotypes. I had heard a lot of misconceptions on different things. I had also heard a lot of horror stories. And I was like, there's no way in hell I'm doing this. This doesn't even sound appealing, not even remotely. And then I met Master Dean and took his class, and I walked up to him after the class, and I was like, I asked him a couple questions, but then, then I asked him like the ultimate question of, okay, so these are like really bad written books. Like, why? Why gore? Why this? Why do you call it this? Why not something else? And he literally looked at me and dead straight face just went, well, because everything needs a name. And I was like, that's why? This is your big reasoning? Oh, crap. And then it clicked. It was like, oh, shit, everything does need a name. Oh, man. God, I hate this guy. You philosophical bastard. But, and then after talking to him, us like riding back and forth because he lived in the middle of Illinois, but I would bug the crap out of him with like little questions. Hey, what about this? What about that? And to the guy's credit, he was nice enough to take the time to write me back and be like, here's this and here's that. And then, he also introduced me to another person, Sir Walter, which is a friend of ours, and we're friends with his house, who also had a kajira at the time and had followed a lot of the philosophies. And so I got to talk to him too. And I sat there and heard like his side of it along with Master Dean's. And I met other people that were older that, did not do this how I had always heard from like the diehard people of, oh, you can't be like this or you have to be like that. And I got to see like a different progressive side of it. And then we also knew Black Diamond and Zamira, and we knew they were Kajira and Master. And Diamond and I talked for a while, and I started to hear his philosophies on it. And both of us were, Black Diamond being an African American male, he had caught a bunch of slack from people that he couldn't be a master because of his race, and just ridiculous things that we had heard, all these different things, and we all just were like, we're gonna do our thing, and be damned with what other people think. And the more we did it, we found out that there were other people out there that had been changing things. And then one day we all just sat down and we're like, you know what? Well, let's go ahead and make a group and let's do an event. We made a group called the Midwest Gorean Collective where we all joined into it, and started getting more people joining and talking to us. And then we found people in Minnesota that did it. And then we found people in Iowa and out on the different coasts. And we were like, oh, we have to throw a green gathering now to where we can get all these people together. And we had a bunch of people come together, and we try to do these like every once in a while to where we'll do a gathering where we get a bunch of different Koreans or people that just want to learn about it to come, and we'll do like a weekend thing to where everybody will get together and stuff like that. So hopefully, actually, we're hoping to do one maybe next year in Kansas City next, because the whole point too when we made the Midwest Korean Collective is for it to be like a traveling homestone, to go all over the place for the different classes. We didn't want to do something like you would see with a Kiki College or something like that, or this big con thing where it's all in the same place every time. We wanted it to move around, and we wanted other people to host it and see how they did their things and how they wanted things to do and what they thought that this should be like, and give other people a chance to show what they were doing with it. So it's just kind of grown.
Cool. Before we start to transition into the part of the show we like to call Inside the Kinkster Studio, is there anything else you would like to share about Gore and your take on it?
Not from me. I mean, I think we pretty much covered what we know about it.
I would like to say something. Switches, I see you. We have friends that always ask, I'm a switch. Can I do this? And I would say, heck yeah. Yes. Be true to your nature. You feel both sides. You live both sides.
Now we come to the part of the show where we get to know you in a little bit different way, a little more interesting and fun way. Are you down?
Heck yeah.
All right. Well, then let's go inside the Kinkster Studio, and here's the first question I have for you. If you had a pet parrot, what would you teach it to say?
Saphira, do you want to go first?
I think I would teach it to say absolutely the fuck not, because that is like... Because for me, as someone who is both a slave and a little, I say that to my master when he is either on the verge of like going past his body limits or like working himself to the bone. And it feels like as a little, it's like my little like sliver of power that I'm like, this is the one thing I have control over. So I think it'd be hilarious if like when he's just doing things, our parrot is just like, no, you can't do it.
Yeah, you would teach it that. Oh, it's real simple for me. I would make it to where if I snap my fingers, this thing would scream out, Master wants coffee now. Master wants coffee now. Get Master coffee. Master coffee now.
What's your favorite toy in your toy bag?
Oh, boy.
This is hard.
I have lots. I would say probably the one I really, really like the most, because it just, every time I pull it out, I see people cringe, would be this hockey puck. But it's not like the normal hockey puck you see, because the handle, it flexes.
Ooh.
So when you hit somebody with it, it like bounces a couple times.
Ooh.
So instead of just being like a hard handle, like on a racquetball handle or something like that, like you always see, or like a golf handle, it actually like moves with it too. So when you swing, it bends a little bit, and then it whack, and then sits there and bounces a couple times. And yeah.
Is that the one that also has the the tire tread on it?
No, that's the other one. I have two of them. And then I have another one that's even longer, that on one side is a hockey puck, but on the other side has a tire tread attached to it. So it's the hockey puck with a tire tread. And yeah, that one's pretty mean too, but that one that bounces, you don't expect to get hit and then get hit again.
Yeah.
Like, Rabbi, that sounds like right up your alley. Except,
it does.
Yeah, definitely not for me for that, but I'm wondering about, like, your other play partner, if they would like it.
Oh, for my favorite thing in his kit. So I love electrical play. His violet wand is currently out of commission.
Sunday.
So I have two things that I absolutely love. One is like a metallic fabric that's like a blanket, because when he hits me with the violet wand, it like dances like electricity, lightning all over your body wherever it's touching you. And he'll say like Star Wars Sith quotes while he does it, because it's the lightning. And then I also love this like carbon fiber rod with rope around it, so it jumps from metal piece to metal piece to metal piece, and when you drag it down your body, it feels like you're getting cut open. It's wonderful.
Nice.
Yeah, the pixie stick's definitely fun.
Have you tried conductive rubber yet?
Well, this one, it's carbon fiber it's so conductive. So it doesn't lose any of the power no matter how long it is, really. So you can use a longer piece and it's not going to be less effective down at the tip because it's 1.5 feet long. Like normal things would just have like it would lose a little bit of the spark. And then you have this piece of 550 cord that's all rainbow color at that, wrapped around it.
It's a rainbow. It can't be bad. It's colorful.
And it's got little spaces in between the 550 cord where it's been wrapped around, so it's not wrapped around so tight that it's touching it. It leaves little gaps. So when you run that thing down, that 550 cord breaks up where you're getting touched with that rod. So
it is fabulous.
It just feels like knives cutting you wide open as this thing just jaggedly shocks the crap out of you.
If you can't tell, we miss electrical play.
What was your first email address or screen name, and why did you pick it?
Go ahead, Master.
Oh, I actually remember mine. Okay, I'm old. So I had a Hotmail account, and I was in the military, so it was late 90s. I had to have a email account because I was going overseas, and to talk to your family and friends, they were like, okay, you have to set up this email account and this and that and the other. And I had to pick a name, and I'm just like, oh my God, I don't know what the hell do I use? Cause I tried like putting my name in, and like that wasn't coming up. And I tried putting this other stuff in, and it wasn't coming up. And I was actually, getting ready to go out on a patrol. I was in the infantry in the military, and one of my buddies screamed out, "Hey, do you need any Illum rounds for your 203 for a 203 grenade launcher?" And I went, "Illum rounds, and I put Illum in, and it was like, "Okay, that's taken. But how about Illum 60?" And I was like, screw it. I'm sick of trying here. Yeah, we're going to go with that. Screw it. So my very first one was Illum 60.
Nice.
Yours is cool. Mine's not. So I'm a Gen Zer. So of course, growing up in grade school, we had to take computer typing classes, and I just set up my first email in class with my legal name at schooladdress.edu. It wasn't fun.
Aww.
Yeah.
I'm so sorry. I think that was probably the same for me too, even though I was a Gen Xer. So I don't know. Now you got me thinking there, Rabbi.
I still use mine.
I know yours is out there in all of the things. Oh.
Final question.
Out of anything and everything, what's the most useless skill that you possess? That you're like, yep, nope, that's me. I got this one. Yep.
Okay, I don't know if I could do it anymore, so I don't even know if this counts. But I would say like 3 years ago, I could say the Greek alphabet forwards and backwards in under 10 seconds. That's like my very useless skill.
That's fair.
Don't ask me why. It was just something that like I just like ran through as like one of my stems was just like saying the Greek alphabet because it just rolls off the tongue.
Oh my goodness. I mean, that's a skill. Or a talent.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for coming on the show. I know I definitely learned a lot.
Mm-hmm.
For our listeners, upcoming synagogue classes in person and virtual on Ratty Daddies, electrical play, body drumming are all coming up. Check the website for specific details. But that's it. That's our show. Say goodnight, little bit.
Good night, little bit.
Follow us on Facebook, FetLife, Twitter, Tumblr, and YouTube as Synagogue BDSM, and on Instagram and TikTok as Synagogue Kink. If you enjoyed or learned something from this podcast, consider making a donation via PayPal, Cash App, Venmo, Patreon, or Ko-fi. Username Synagogue, or find those links to all of those on our website, synagoguebdsm.com. Remember, that's synagogue with an I. Also on the website, links to past episodes, upcoming classes, book us as educators, shop our store, and more.
Synagogue hosts and guests are subject matter experts but are not the expert. We believe that, outside of violating consent, there is no wrong way to do kink, except to think your way is the only way. This show is presented from a RAC, risk-aware consensual kink point of view, and not SSC, safe, sane, consensual, because every individual's definition of safe is different based on their own risk profile. The use of the word safe on this show fits our definition of safe, and that does not have to be your definition. Opinions expressed by guests on the show are those of the person expressing the opinion, not of the show.
This is not bullshit!
Just a reminder, we try to make our content as inclusive as possible, regardless of gender, orientation, role in the lifestyle, etc. But we do inherently speak from our own point of view. For the most part, substitute our identity with your own to make it work. We want to know when we make a mistake, so we can learn and grow from those mistakes. So if you feel like we did say something that is genuinely offensive, we encourage you to let us know. Reach out to us with your questions, comments, or concerns via our website or call us at 469-269-0403.
Brought to you today by the letters and the number.
San Diego High School Football Room!